This is Asgard's Wrath 2, the follow-up to one of the best VR games ever made that placed you in the role of a fledgling god known as the Cosmic Guardian who must inhabit mortals on an epic quest set in Norse mythology. This released December 15th, 2023 for the Quest 2 and Up headsets for $50 US, and for this review, we checked the game out on the Quest 3 before and after the first update that enhanced the presentation for that headset. With the first game releasing for PC headsets only, can this standalone-only sequel deliver upon the grandeur of its predecessor, or suffer from the limitations of mobile chipsets? Let's find out, shall we? Hello VR deities! Before we get to it, if you enjoyed this vid, a thumbs up from you would help us out, as would hitting that subscribe button, and if you're so inclined, leave us a comment with your thoughts on this release. I'm Ryan for the VR Grid, now let's do this. I'm going to try and keep this review on the shorter side, and not dive as deep into the mechanics as I tend to, as there's honestly so much in Asgard's Wrath 2 to talk about, that covering it all would make for an insanely long video. So, for those that haven't played the first one, and I'm sure that's many of you, you can catch up thanks to an optional, previously on Asgard's Wrath, cinematic, which summarizes the events of the first game and explains why you appear to be stuck in a Norse tavern. Naturally, you escape from your makeshift prison and begin your quest to seek out revenge against the trickster god Loki as you traverse locations from around the world, inhabiting lesser beings and meeting other gods from different mythos. The word I keep coming back to when it comes to Asgard's Wrath 2 is grandiose. This is easily the biggest game to ever release on the Quest platform, and it's quite clear that the developers were trying to bring the AAA when it comes to both scope and scale. It's a semi-open world affair that offers up a lengthy main story, apparently 60 hours worth of content, and plenty of bonus missions and side quests should you want for that sort of thing. It very much reminds me of the Assassin's Creed or Red Dead series when it comes to basic game structure, in that you are relatively free to do what you want, but can head back to the main story whenever you feel like it, more or less. As your powers, weapons, and companions are tied directly to the story, the more you focus your efforts there, the more the game becomes available for you to play, and while I appreciate just how much game is here, I quickly began to ignore anything besides the main story. The combat is visceral and fairly in-depth, bringing back the parry and attack system from the first game, but making it much more organic by letting you move freely during these sections. Enemies have a variety of attacks, some that can be blocked or parried, while others need to be evaded, while you, inhabiting a mortal, have a few weapons and powers at your disposal. Proper parries may reveal weak spots that cause much more damage when you whack at them, and overall, it's a solid combat system that only gets more involved the longer you play, thanks to the additional abilities, companions, and the various foes who mix up attack strategies. The thing is, as much as I appreciate all the fighting, after around the 8-hour mark, I ended up dumbing down the difficulty to story mode just so I could breeze through these standard encounters as they began to feel quite samey. I am specifically talking about those regular foes, as the mini-boss battles typically added new dynamics thanks to their specific weaknesses, and any encounters with actual gods were always harrowing experiences. Surprisingly, as much combat as there is to be found here, there is just as much puzzling, if not more, and I'm pleasantly surprised by just how much variety there is in all these obstacles. Puzzles can be simple as just figuring out how to climb, wall walk, pull a lever, or yank a chain, but as the game progresses, they get more and more complex, requiring you to use and chain together not just your abilities, but those of your companions as well. Don't forget that you are a god, and there are sections where you can assume your godly form, looking upon the environment your host finds him or herself in, allowing you to move huge sections of the stage, and adding yet another layer to all the puzzling in the game. Every time a new mechanic is introduced, you can bet your ass that's going to be needed to solve a plethora of puzzles down the line, and I appreciated just how little handholding there was during some of these sections, though I need to say, despite the game constantly trying new things, the game loop of exploration, combat, puzzles, and god puzzles did get a little tiresome at times. I think it's just the nature of the beast when it comes to games promising this much content, and I will give the devs credit here, as they do a great job of constantly adding new elements to contend with. It can just feel a little formulaic at times, or during longer play sessions. If it's not puzzles or combat, it's exploration, crafting, and delving into the various other elements that make this feel like a fully realized semi-open world game, and just like its flat counterparts, if I could avoid any of these elements, it typically did. Almost every system feels quite robust, minus the crafting, giving players plenty of other things to do, but unless it was a necessity, I tended to ignore them. You can collect random items throughout your travels, which can be traded or used at vendors, though the only time I ever used these were when I was in desperate need of health or revival potions after a failed encounter. Exploration will of course yield more loot, though on more than a few occasions, entering a random cave brought me to an identical cave I just visited, hampering immersion, and with these smaller areas typically not having great loot in the first place, I soon stopped visiting them altogether. There's a decent perk system at play that lets you spend points gained from experience, or specific items, that unlock or upgrade yours or your companion's abilities. Every time you encounter something new, an entry is added to your codex should you wish to read more about said foe, friend, or location. In the menu, you can customize your minions with items and purchased armor, view all your active quests, check out the minimaps, and a host more things to keep yourself busy, though navigating through all these options can be a tad tedious, as there are plenty of options to wade through. Lastly would be optional missions where you need to enter tears in reality and dispatch bad guys to seal them up. What makes these special is that some of these will play in mixed reality, as minions come at you in the real world, and while this did feel a little tacked on, it's a unique and clever use of the headset's pass-through features. Speaking of keeping busy, there is a passive online component to this as well that tasks you with completing daily objectives for extra loot. There's also the ability to leave avatars of yourself throughout the land, which I found to be nothing short of annoying, as it seemed like every few steps I took led me to yet another ghost with a username above it performing some stupid dance or pose, though thankfully, there is an option to disable this feature and keep things less messy looking. Now, as far as presentation goes, Asgard's Wrath 2 sets the bar when it comes to scope in regard to standalone headsets. I'm not gonna lie, I'm disappointed there's no PC version available, as the first game was a marvel to behold, offering up some of the highest quality visuals we had seen up to that point. Amazingly, the scope of that first game is carried over here, offering up massive stages that let you view them from a human or god's eyes. The texture quality in almost everything and everyone isn't great, but it almost doesn't matter considering just how much game is here. Despite those less than impressive textures, are wonderfully animated NPCs and an attention to detail that, from a distance, had me in awe of just how much gaming world I could see. There's some minor pop-in throughout, but I found most of that to be well within acceptable, save for when traversing large areas where wild animals would seemingly appear out of nowhere as I was traveling on the backs of my companions. There are some lighting effects at play beyond just the static ones found in each stage, which adds some realism to the world. The scale of some gods and creatures is nothing short of mesmerizing, and when the game is working to impress, it usually does. On the Quest 3, I did encounter some moments where frames dropped a bit, but for the most part, this performed near flawlessly, and despite some of my misgivings, is still one of the most impressive titles to come to standalone headsets. As far as audio goes, it's a complete package with tons of voice work, spatial audio, an epic soundtrack, and sound effects that match everything happening around you, and I have no complaints in this department. It sounds fantastic. So, as I wrap this review up, I am blown away by what's been achieved on the Quest platform, with Asgard's Wrath 2 easily being the most complete AAA experience available for that headset. The puzzles are engaging, the combat is solid, and there's plenty else to do besides that, but it can all get fatiguing after a while. In no way is it bad, and in no way am I done with this. I just think I'm going to take it easy and play this at a slower pace than I have been up to this point, picking away at the game until my next face-off with a god, which is where the game shows its strengths. I'm going to give Asgard's Wrath 2 an 8 out of 10. This is something special for sure, but it can get repetitive at times. If you enjoyed this review, why not do all the YouTube things to help us out? And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching.